Uh, no, I'm excited about tonight. This has been something that Teresa and I have been counting down to for about 6 months now, honestly, whenever we first decided we were going to do this again. And the scary thing is we haven't done this webinar since we were previewing 2022
Yeah,
trends.
yeah.
So whenever we show here in a minute, we're going to show our trends, what we missed, what we got right. We're going to make sure everybody can see that. And then we're going to kick into 2025. So I'm going to kick things off tonight, and then I'm going to hand it off to the much better partner in this duo.
Oh,
Trust me on that, the cleanup hitter, as we like to say. But absolutely, Teresa, anything to add before I dive in?
no, I'm excited that you all are here, and I know some of you signed up today from the newsletter, which is great. So thank you very much for reading the newsletter. And if you're not a listener of Chew on This, the podcast, it's kind of our hobby. It's our pet project. We just have a lot of fun on it, but we do talk about news and stuff on there. I know a lot of you listen to either Kevin's Dental Assistant Nation or Dr. Bicuspid podcast, or Nobody Told Me That. But this one is, and then once we start doing video, Kevin, I think that just took the show to a different
That's a
level.
whole new ball game for sure. I know every time I come up from the basement after we've done something, Dana's like, "Okay, what were you laughing about this time?" So I heard you laughing. So no,
So
it's
before you get started though, Kevin, I just
yeah.
wanted to say again that in the chat, I did put a link to the Google Drive that has the handouts and some resources on there. The QR code is really for people who are listening to this on the replay. So feel free to just click right into the Google Drive and download the slides. So K-Dog, take it away.
Hey, let's do this. Okay. So, like I said a minute ago, we're going to look back at 2022. And I'm going to start with my bold prediction since I'm leading this off. And this is what I said about this time in 2021 for what I thought was going to happen in 22. And to be honest with you, got some things right and really missed on those last two. I will tell you, think back to what we were buzzing about when it came to Walmart and the dental practice opening in Walmart and how big a thing that was going to be. Well, it turns out it wasn't that big a thing at all. It turns out that it was something that we definitely, I think, overshot a little bit in the dental industry. Now, whenever I was looking back at this earlier today, it ties in with what we're going to be talking about, I think, for 2025. Because one of the things that we were all excited about when it came to Walmart was that it was going to be easy access, right? It was going to be reaching a demographic maybe that didn't exactly see the need for dentistry. It was going to be something that was going to be a one-stop shop where you were going to be able to go into Walmart and get, a prescription. You were going to be able to go in and have your eyes checked. You were going to be able to go to the dentist. All these different things. Well, the dental part didn't happen, but there's still this undertow of what is going to happen as far as the dental medical connection. So I want you guys just to keep that in mind that while we might not be going to a Walmart, we're still absolutely treading toward what is going to be a dental medical model. And if you listen to the podcast that I just did and put up on drbicuspid.com, with Dr. Brett Kessler, who's the president of the American Dental Association, it's very apparent what the ADA is wanting to do and the direction that they're kind of pushing dentistry right now toward more of a medical model, toward more dental medical integration. That's also something that is a buzz right now with the Dental Trade Alliance. So I encourage you. I'm not going to talk too much about my interview with Dr. Kessler, but absolutely, it's on the drbicuspid.com podcast. If you're listening to that, it's about 15 minutes. We keep things real short and compact. All right, let's move ahead. Let's turn the clock forward to 2025. And before I get started, these are two gentlemen that have really contributed to my portion tonight, and I want to give them credit. Dr. Marko Vujic with the American Dental Association and Brian Ballou, who with ITR Economics. Both of these gentlemen gave presentations at the Dental Trade Alliance meeting 2 weeks ago in Napa, California. And it was about where dentistry is heading. And so what I did is I listened to what they both had to say. They were both on the Dr. Bicuspid podcast as well. And I took some of their best nuggets and I want to share those with you tonight, along with what I heard that's going to kind of undergird some of these numbers that you're going to hear. But I also want to give credit to Marko for one thing that he did. And this was his opening slide at DTA. And I thought it was fantastic. And I just want you to take a second to read this because some of the things that I'm going to share tonight, maybe some of the things that Teresa is going to share tonight, They may not exactly jibe with what you're thinking. They may rub you a little bit the wrong way. But we're going to tell you what we're hearing in the industry and maybe even outside the industry that's going to impact dentistry. And we just want you to know that even though it may not be exactly what you believe, it may still be the truth. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward tonight. So let's start with the numbers and let's start where we've come since the start of this century. And these are the newest numbers from the ADA, from the ADA Health Policy Institute. And one of the things that I'm really finding very fascinating is that obviously we're having more and more dentists come in to our industry, which is good because the United States population keeps growing, it keeps expanding. But what we're seeing, and we're going to talk about population in the US here in just a few minutes, but what we're seeing is that those population centers are being deluged with dentists. Now, everybody wants to go to Vegas. Everybody wants to go to Miami. Everybody wants to come here to Denver, right? I mean, it's a hot spot. You want to open your practice around a population center. But what we're looking at is some parts of the country that are still being very neglected whenever it comes to access to dental care. And so while you may see that we're having 60.41 dentists per thousand population, and that's slightly up from what it was in 2001, there's still some areas of the country that are still having issues with that. And, I'm a native of Oklahoma, and I consider Oklahoma the South. And I will tell you, whenever I look at the numbers of dentists in the South, take out Georgia and Atlanta and some of the major population areas, we're having some problems because look how far that Arkansas and Alabama trail the rest of the country. These were the two lowest states per 1,000 U.S. population. And to compare that, of course, now Alaska may be a little bit skewed because we know the population is a little bit different there, as is the population centers, but Massachusetts. I'll be up for Yankee Dental in just a couple of months, as we were discussing. And it's very interesting to see the spike that there is in the Northeast, in the far West, whenever it comes to dentists, but the southern part of the United States, we're still trailing a little bit behind. Sorry, there we go. We're also changing as far as what we're doing in terms of our age and who's owning things. So there's a lot of talk about DSOs. There's a lot of talk about private equity money coming into dentistry. Most of you all saw that yesterday Patterson Dental was going to be acquired for $4.1 billion by a private equity company. And it signifies some of the things that are coming in dentistry because dentistry is considered a very stable market. That's a great thing, but at the same time, it's opening up to outside of dentistry. So this little dental enclave that we've had for so many years is definitely changing. Not saying it's good or bad, but it's changing. Some of the ideas, some of the mindsets are changing. And look at what has happened to the younger generation. 2005, 25.4% of the dentists that were in practice owned a practice. Today, that number is 8.8%. Now, you can look at the DSO part of things. You can also look at that massive student debt that dental students are coming out, and they're trying to figure out how to pay it down the quickest way possible. And of course, owning a practice, well, that's just more debt. So them going into the DSOs, them trying to figure out other ways to become associates or whatever it might be, it's changing how that we're viewing dentistry for these younger generations. And it's not just those immediate graduates as well. I wanted you to see as well the 30 to 34 age group and how that has dropped as well over the last 18 or so years. Now, this is from the ADA Health Policy Institute. This is something that they showed at the Dental Trade Alliance meeting. And you'll notice the orange. I want to talk about hygienists for just a minute here, because we're going to get into that staffing shortage. This is something that always is talked about. I will tell you, anytime that we put out a staffing shortage article on Dr. Bicuspid, it gets tons of clicks because people want to know what is going on. But one thing that Marco Vujicic pointed out at the Dental Trade Alliance, look at that arrow that is going up as far as the dental hygiene and the people that are coming into the hygiene programs. We're at an all-time high right now. That's great news, right? Well, look at the right side and look how it flattens out whenever they actually become graduates. So just over 7,000 versus just under 9,000. That's quite a drop of hygienists that we're losing from the time that they register to the time that they actually graduate. Now, there's a couple of things involved with that, and Marco would not give credence to that this was the reason why it was happening. But one of the things that we know is that there are fewer and fewer instructors, fewer and fewer dentists that will give those checks and things like that during hygiene school. And so it's kind of tough for those hygienists to progress through as they have in previous years. And again, let's go back to the cost for schooling and everything else. While it doesn't rival what the dentist is doing, it certainly is, it's costly. And then I want to point out something that often gets overlooked on this slide, and it's something that I want dental practices to really understand. Look at the very bottom. You see lab techs? Now, granted, we are not graduating a lot of lab techs. So this is good news if you have a CEREC. This is good news if you've got that in-office CAD CAM. But if you are sending your cases out right now to labs, you might ask them what their succession plan is. If it's a small mom and pop place, and those still do exist, I know that very well. But is there a son or a daughter or somebody who is willing to take that business over? Or again, private equity is acquiring labs as well and turning them into DSO type labs where there are groupings out there. So we're seeing fewer and fewer lab techs come out. And the question becomes, what does that do for digital dentistry moving forward? So let's talk more about staffing challenges. And if you have a practice out there right now, either you are dealing with this or you know somebody who is. And in Q3 of 2022, we've gotten better, if you want to say slightly better, because you've gone from 94.8% finding it very challenging to find a hygienist 2 years ago to 91.7% now. Dental assistants are a little bit better, but I still think 75.6% of practices saying it's extremely or very challenging to find a qualified dental assistant. That's not exactly, a reason to celebrate right now. It has come down, but we still have a big problem whenever 3 out of 4 practices are saying that they feel it's extremely or very challenging. So this is what Marco told me on the episode of the drbicuspid.com podcast I recorded with him. And I want to make sure that you see the part of the quote where he says, there's nothing on the horizon that's going to magically put 10% more bodies into the market. So I think we have to accept the reality that the staffing shortage is not going to go away anytime soon. And if we're sitting there waiting for this white horse to come right in and save the day, it's simply not going to happen. And so whenever we talk about AI, whenever we talk about technology, whenever we talk about outsourcing, this is one of the biggest reasons why it's gaining such traction in our industry, is because we're going to need to figure out how to do as much as we've done, but with fewer bodies, especially knowing that we have a generation gap as well. We have a lot of baby boomers that are starting to age out over the next 3 to 4 years. And we know that we're going to need to figure out how to replace them, not necessarily with bodies, but with automation. I also want to highlight this, and this is from Brian Ballou with ITR Economics. And one of the things that he wanted to make sure that we saw is that what we are paying our team members is way above what the average should be. You see that line right there? That's right about the average that it should be. And you can see that big dip, of course, during COVID. But look at what is projected for 2025, 2026. It's going to keep going up. And one of the things that Ballou said while he was making this presentation at the DTA, he wanted dental practices to really stop and look at what they are paying their team members. Are we paying them too much out of fear that they're going to leave? One thing that he mentioned, and I thought it was very interesting, is that we have gotten in such a position of fear that we will pay team members whatever they're asking, $100 hygienists, whatever it might be. And the question becomes, is it matching up with what we can actually afford in the dental practice? So heading into 2025, one of the biggest things that I'm encouraging dental practices, and I hope that all of you will take the time to do this, is do your labor costs actually fit into the mold that you're making some kind of profit or decent living from working in that dental practice? And if not, it may be time to revisit some of those things and really see what kind of ROI that you're getting out of those team members that you may be paying higher salaries. So what are hygienists making? Well, you can look around the country and you can see the West Coast here in Colorado as well. There's a lot of pockets, East Coast, right again, Heart of Yankee Dental, where we'll be next month. There's a lot of pockets where they are making a very good living, and there's nothing wrong with that. I want to make sure everybody understands. I am not saying they're overpaid. I am not saying anything like that. But what I am saying is that we need to make sure that if this is the income that they're bringing in, that we are getting a return on that investment and making sure that the scheduling is right, making sure that the production is right, whatever it might be. And one thing I just want to point out real quick, I want you to look again. I mentioned the issues in the South. I want you to look at that pocket of light blue that is in the South. And again, think about what we're doing to promote oral hygiene in those areas. I think that this is an area that we really want to see dentistry take a very firm stance on access to care, because it's not just around the world. It's here in the United States where we need some of that access to care as well. So these are things that Brian Ballou said, and he believes that we are going to see inflation come back. And I want to just say before I even start down this road, this is not political. This has nothing to do with who won the White House, who lost the White House. It doesn't matter. This is what he is saying from a macroeconomic standpoint, okay? And one of the biggest things that he is telling us is that you, as a dental practice, need to start budgeting more for power. Now, that may not be something that was really on your bingo card whenever we started this program tonight, but he is saying that electricity costs are projected to keep rising through the end of this decade. And why is that? Well, look at what is happening right now and what is projected to happen. Again, this is from ITR Economics. And one of the things that he is saying is we hear about AI, we hear about Bitcoin, we hear about crypto, right? We hear about all these things. All of these things are going to take more power to actually make them work. And you can see the lines going up there. And by the way, the green is Asia, the blue is the United States, the red is Europe. So Europe is actually going to be taking on the biggest chunk of electricity. And we need to be thinking about here in the United States, that blue line, as I mentioned, we need to be thinking about costs for that. So whenever you're doing your budgeting for the upcoming year, I know utilities isn't often something that's at the top of the list, but Mr. Blue says that it's definitely something to be considering as you think about what is to come for your practice. So these are his advice, and I want to just hit that middle one more than anything else about the electricity costs. He believes that they will be trending upward, and he also suggested this, and I thought it was really good advice. We planning this time of year is always important, but he's suggesting using the next 12 months to really think about how you're going to contend with inflation and interest rate rises and the things that are being projected on an economic level. Now, a grain of salt here. Some of the things that are being said by incoming President Trump may not happen, and it may change things, or we may see, a different reaction than is expected. These are projections. They are not realities. But still, if economists are looking ahead to what is being said right now about the economy and the impact of President Trump taking back over the White House in January, these are the things that they believe that dental businesses and businesses overall should be considering. And then this is my last slide, and I'm going to turn it over to the amazing Teresa Duncan. But where you live in the country, how's your population doing? I will tell you, when he put this up, the one thing that really surprised me is look at California. They have actually lost population. The last time that I put this up, California and Nevada were among the highest in terms of people moving in there. And that was, again, before we looked at 2022. Things changed a lot in those last couple of years. Things changed a lot with COVID and people moving out of there. But one thing that I want you to look at, Idaho, 9.8%. There's nowhere in the country that is growing more than Idaho. So if you're anywhere near Boise, hey, game on. But this is also something, again, with your practice. I don't want you just thinking about what your practice is going to do in its little bubble heading into next year, but I want you to know what's going on around you as well. And while it's good to see a lot of states are growing, it may be slow growth or there could be a slight decline as well. So it's just good to know these things as you're making your plans for next year. And Teresa, guess what?
I'm up.
I'm
All
up.
right, let me
I'm
go
out.
ahead and,
I'm,
change over and I'll
yep.
grab the screen.
Yep. I'm gonna say
And
stop sharing.
you could keep an eye on the participants in the waiting room because we've been having them trickle in and out.
I
So,
will do that.
which is
Absolutely.
great. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that it's a late webinar and we're still like going. And I know a lot of us are on the East Coast. So look at that. We're getting all jazzed up before it's time for our PJs. So here's my bold predictions for 22. And I will tell you that, yeah, I was okay, but I think I could have been a lot better for sure. The carriers continuing to make their networks more efficient for their clients. I mean, yes, but didn't make it easier for us. And some of us who are really involved with insurance, it got more difficult for us. And I'll talk about that just for a little bit. But the employers are realizing a lot of savings on that. And then you're also going to see a lot of employers actually being able to reduce their savings even more. I was listening to a webinar yesterday on that was from an HR company, and they were saying that employers more than ever now are doing all of this changing around of medical plans. And so I was thinking, of course, because we're seeing it on the dental side. So yeah, so that was kind of, I guess, kind of a win for us, right? So staffing shortages not letting up anytime soon. Definitely, I think Kevin and I were in agreement on that for sure. Fees having to go up for sure. Inflation, we definitely hit that. But here's the thing, many of you can't raise your fees because you're stuck in contracts. Well, or you're in an economic area that just didn't happen that way. So they did have to go up, but whether or not you were able to raise your fees, that's a different story. So profitability likely to shrink as overhead increases. Well, when you've got wages that are really high, your overhead is really high. And I know Kevin talked a little bit about the hygiene wages, and Kathy Forbes put a really good comment in there about how the wages have been suppressed for a while. And I think that's true too. And I think that's true also for the admin team. I mean, we were not doing very well before COVID. You rarely saw over 75,000 for a single office for a manager. And now, that's pretty much a good rate for a manager who's managing a whole staff and all of that. That's a good starting. But can we continue to sustain huge salaries that are really competitive with like the corporate world? And I think it's not a matter of can we sustain. I think it's a matter of how you're going to make it work, because you have to, because competition is coming from all over the place. It's not just dentistry. We'll talk about that. So it's I think we got a lot right, Kevin and I, and we take a lot of pride in making sure that we like know what's going on in the industry. So it was kind of fun to see like, oh wow, I really screwed that up, or oh wow, Kevin, that you nailed that one. So it's kind of fun. But here's what I'm focusing on in the future. And I know that a lot of you, I recognize a lot of your names here. You take my classes, and so you probably are going to be familiar with some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. But the administrative burden, so that's a buzzword. And you're going to be hearing more and more about that. So administrative burden is really all of the extra work that the carriers, it really focuses on carriers, that the carriers are kind of requesting from us. And it's not that they're sending us a nice note and requesting it. It's the fact of, in order for us to meet compliance, in order for us to get claims paid, we have to do all this. So you'll hear the term administrative burden quite often, I think, in the future. And that's something that is a buzzword for legislators too. So if you feel like administrative burden is rising in your office due to undue requests or unreasonable requests, that's the kind of thing that you take to the state dental society so that they can then take it up the ladder and maybe move on legislatively. And I will just do a quick touch on that. AI is going to be really widely implemented in non-clinical areas. And I know some of my speaker colleagues, and Anne Marie DePalma is on the call here.
We're going.
We definitely,
We're going.
Oh, Mel is going somewhere. Where are you going, Mel? No, I'm kidding, Mel. So so it's one of those things where the meeting planners are asking for more and more information on this because you all are asking for it. And so if you're not familiar with this, if you're kind of like, what is she talking about? It's okay, because that's pretty much, I think it's most of the industry. Because when we talk about AI, we really think about like radiographs, images like Pearl and all of that. But what I'm talking about is helping us do all of our admin work, our marketing, our HR. It's a whole new world, right? I'm going to focus a little bit on revenue cycle management in just a second. Outsourcing has almost become the norm instead of like, ooh, should I take a chance? It's almost now it's in order to keep your costs down and in order to avoid burnout. And honestly, some of the we're like Kevin said, we're not swimming in employees, right? So we've got to do something to make sure that we don't lose the good ones that we have. Alternative hygiene models are becoming more attractive. And I do want to spend some time on that when we do our bold predictions for the year, because I'm hearing very just all over the place ways of dealing with the hygiene shortage, and creative ways, scary ways, but kind of inspiring ways in a way also. So we'll talk about that. But transparency and clarity are really what I would love for us as an industry to focus on for our patients, because if we don't get ahead of the ball with that, it's going to come down legislatively. So let me dive into all of these topics so that we can really get a hold of, wrap our arms around it. So this meme went up on my social media and I got a lot of good reactions to it. And my billing friends were all just like, oh my gosh, it's like you're reading my mind. I know, when you're trying to figure out your networks and who you're in network with, what network, now it's just January 1st. Now what network am I in? It's not easy. Some of you have Excel spreadsheets going for days. Some of you are outsourcing it. But the average number of networks per provider is 26.5. And that's a lot. So even if like Cigna has 4 or 5 networks and Delta has 4 or 5 networks, so I mean, you can see how it grows exponentially. But at the same time, how much extra work is that for you to track down? Is the right fee schedule getting attached? Did your termination papers go through so that you terminated from one and not the other? And when I started consulting and teaching, oh my gosh, a long time ago, when I did credentialing, when I did negotiations, it was easy. It was easy. I mean, we would figure out the right person to call, we'd become friends with them, it was just easy. Now I would never try to do that myself, only because it's time consuming. It just, I don't have the right contacts. I don't know the right verbiage anymore. It's just so different now, which is really indicative when we talk about administrative burden. It's really indicative of the problem, because when you used to say to somebody, I'm an insurance coordinator, or I handle insurance in the office, they knew what you did. You filed the claims, you followed up on them, you put in payments. Now there's so many different aspects to working insurance in an office that you could have one person doing each one of those tasks, and they would be busy all day. So the administrative burden is a little scary for me, because I feel like I've got deja vu, watching the medical side kind of go this direction. When I was in grad school, that was, and again, it was a while ago. That was back when the medical side, the physicians they owned all the practices, and then you started to see them slowly get acquired, get bought, sell to hospital systems, sell to private systems. And the main reason that many of those doctors decided to sell their practices and say, I just want to be a doctor, was because of the administrative burden. And a lot of that had to do with compliance, and audits, random audits, but really compliance. And a lot of it was compliance with Medicare, because of course it became so huge. And I worry, because I feel like I'm seeing that happen again in our industry. And I do, I don't want us to go down that road. But when you take a look around and see how many private practices are actually selling because the doctor's like, I don't want to do this anymore, you start to think, okay, I think I've seen this before. Now, another aspect of administrative burden is dealing with the many Medicare Advantage plans that are out there. And so there's a handful of us out there speaking on Medicare Advantage, and I'm not the best on Medicare Advantage. I know enough to teach you, but there is definitely a lot to learn. And so even if I were to study for like a month and figure everything out, well, a new set of rules, regulations is going to come out in a couple months. And so the people who hustle and say, I'm going to train you on Medicare Advantage, there's some really good ones out there. They know what they're doing, and I know that they keep up on it. It is not one of those aspects of an insurance coordinator where you just kind of take your eye off the ball and then come back and say, hey, what's going on with Medicare Advantage plans in my office? I give you these stats because first of all, we're all getting older. Kevin and I talk about this all the time. We're getting old. We're getting old. What are we going to do? Our spouses, Dana and Norman, they're going to have to deal with us just being grumpy all the time, right? I think Dana's on the call. She's like, I already deal with that. But here's the thing, we're getting older. The whole population is getting older. And so if you take a look at the growth and attractiveness of Medicare Advantage plans, it really is no surprise that you're seeing so many of them in your office. Now, another, and it was interesting when Kevin showed the map of the country, when you take a look at some of the states that were red, they were losing population. I was a little surprised about that because where you look at Medicare Advantage penetration, you would think it would be in Florida, Arizona, where it's warm because old people like that. I like it. I like it already, right? Here's the issue. When you're retired and on a fixed income, you are going to gravitate to low cost of living areas. And so I was surprised to see some of the southern states that were in the red because they are low income. But you will see in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, that whole area there, that is very, very heavy Medicare Advantage plans. And so if you're in an area where you have a lot of seniors, a lot of fixed income, this is going to be a lot of your book of business. So just know what's going on out there. On my YouTube channel, I recorded a video on how to find all the Medicare Advantage plans in your area so that you yourself can go in and see what the coverage looks like and be ready for them. Like if one of your patients calls you and asks for an opinion, or if they come in and they always say, I don't know my plan. Can you help me with it? And you're like, yes, of course. So that gets you ahead of the curve there. So as far as legislation goes, and we're still tied into administrative burden. There is a lot of issues. So, okay, let me back up. The states have been very active legislatively. Every state has been pretty busy passing laws. I try to stay up on this as much as possible. The other side of it is that the carriers have also been very busy legislatively. So I am constantly surprised every time I say, okay, this law passed, because maybe 10 years ago, we didn't see all this activity. But now more than ever, our state associations have realized that if we're going to get things changed, we have to get going with it. And so kudos to them. So taking a step back from that, though, so cautious celebratory attitude here. When they pass the state law, it applies, of course, only to fully funded plans, which are the ones that the state can handle, has jurisdiction on. The vast majority of plans out there are self-funded, like the government, Medicare Advantage. They're self-funded. And so state laws, for the most part, do not apply to them. And so the Doc Access Act of 2023, which is still hung up in committee. It doesn't look like it's moving. And of course, now we're in transition, but I'm going to keep an eye on this, and so will the ADA. This law in particular would advocate that the ERISA protection, the law that protects self-funded plans from having the state statutes apply to them, that would then be removed. And I think that would be super helpful for our administrative burden, because half of the battle is figuring out, does your state law apply to this particular plan that's right in front of you? So as an experienced insurance coordinator, I know that I have to look at that. Does this apply to this plan? What does the coverage booklet look like? But think about it this way. There's a ton of new people coming into the industry all of the time. This is a nuance that's going to get lost on them. So I'm hoping we can standardize that. Now, all of the states have had a lot of activity on virtual credit cards, network transparency laws. Illinois just passed a fantastic network transparency law, lots of teeth to it. So basically, if you opt out, one aspect of it is if you opt out of moving on to a network that your umbrella network is going to push you into, that there's no retaliation, meaning that they can't say, well, you have to join this network or else we're kicking you out, right? So that's good because that was something that was happening. So this is something that if you are, whatever state you're in, I highly urge you to, if your doctor's a member of the state association, let him or her know that anything that has to do with advocacy, or if you can even get your newsletter, your address signed up, let's, as managers and industry, watchers, let's keep an eye on that so that we can track that and see how it impacts. So gone are the days now where we just go, oh, did you hear about that law that passed? We as business leaders, and some of us business owners, we actually have a responsibility to know how the law is going to affect us, because there's that nasty piece of compliance that we can talk about later. So here we go with the artificial intelligence, and Kevin, I'm really trying hard. And if you want to come in as an investor, this would be great. I would like to design some sort of AI where I just put this on in the morning and every dental plan just downloads itself into me, right? So I think there's a couple people that would love that too, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, not for me anyway. So at some point, somebody will come up with this, and that'll be fantastic. However, this is the perception that offices have, or that patients have, is that, they give us the card and we automatically know every little clause that goes to it. Well, it maybe. So here's where I want us to think about. And so those of us that have been doing this a long time, I feel like, the Anne Marie's and the Delane and the Devons who were on the call, we've been doing this a while. Dana's on the call. I feel like we have gone through so much technology since we started. And in fact, I think we've been through the most amount of technology. So we had to deal with intraoral images, like what the heck is that? And then we had to deal with X-ray, developers that weren't in a dark room. Then we had to deal with scheduling out of a book. No, it's now on the computer. So I feel like we're a little bit quicker to adapt to change. And what I've been noticing is that a lot of the resistance to using AI in the office is coming from the small office managers, meaning small offices, maybe 2, 3 providers, or even one provider. And they're worried that they're going to lose their job, that they're going to get replaced. And so I want us to see if we can just put that on the shelf for a little bit, because I think it's a matter of, if you can harness it and learn how it's going to help you, you're actually more valuable if you can be the one that's giving it the instructions. So I focus on money, our revenue cycle management. I like that I can call it revenue cycle management, because when I tell people that I just want to focus on money, it just sounds so bad, right, Kevin? It just sounds so shady, but revenue cycle management sounds nicer. So here's where all of it kind of goes together. And so we're already using some of it. So AI, patient intake, communications. Many of you have chatbots on your offices, on your website. And in fact, I've been having one, I just opened up a membership, and I've been playing with the bot that comes with it. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is great, because I always worry, am I not going to be able to answer somebody fast enough? So that's what our patients want. Our patients want easy access. And so the AI usage in revenue cycle management, it's not necessarily to replace you, it's to make you more accessible to the patient whenever the patient wants it. And as a service industry and as healthcare providers, that's what we do. So don't look at it as going to take your job. Believe me, there's tons more stuff for you to do. I mean, seriously, there's so much to do in the office. But every single one of those, and it's not all insurance. This is all like communications, the reporting. As a manager, I would love to have, I mean, look at this robot just coming over with all the reports. Like, I don't have to run the reports. The robot just walks over and gives it to me, right? Robot's not going to change the thermometer. Robot's not going to drink my last Diet Coke. Robot's not going to ask me to go to Starbucks. Robot just gives me the reports. I'm good with that, right? So this is where we're going. And I think if we can put our discomfort aside, and really embrace this new technology. If you're scared of it, then yeah, it's gonna freak you out and it's not gonna be good. So let's just try to wrap our arms around it and see if we can make it work in our office. So now we've got, and it's always like, here we are with Christmas season, buy now, pay later. We're getting inundated with it. Much to my husband's chagrin, I bought a brand new wonderful vacuum cleaner off of QVC because that's just what I do, right, Kevin? So it was a wonderful vacuum cleaner, but I was enticed to buy now, pay later. And he's looking at me and he goes, "Why would you buy now, pay later?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know, maybe, I don't know." He's like, "No, stop it." So it is the whole thing is they make it so easy to purchase, and consumers are purchasing, right? So lots of vacations now, right? Yeah, inflation's up and everybody's complaining about groceries, but lots of vacations happening now. Here's the issue. If you give a patient the easiest path in the world to do business with you, whether it's a chatbot, online scheduling, online payments, it will happen. If you give them any friction, then in today's very, very small like window of opportunity for a consumer, you're going to lose them. The American consumer is just easily distracted, very easily frustrated. And how many times have you, I mean, you probably know people where they try to do something online and they're just like, forget it, I'll do it later. They never come back and do it later. So now is the time for us to get up to speed on all of this, the texting, the online payment, all of that. Online scheduling, I know a lot of people are actually loving that. I am still like, I am loving it, but I'm loving it cautiously, only because I just feared that like the patients I really didn't like getting into the schedule and I can't do anything about it. So I know some of you know what I'm talking about, like that fear. Um, One of the fun things that I do, because I am a nerd, is some of the stock photo that I see is really just awful. And I had to share this with you. So the No Surprises Act, I'm going to talk about that, but this is probably the most disturbing dental stock photo, Kevin, I have ever seen in my life. And so sorry. So if anybody's like really just scared of clowns, just put your hand up for a while. All right. So cost transparency. As an industry, we have a duty to be as transparent with fees as possible. Out of network offices, the ones that are transitioning out, have learned that if you do not give clear pricing, give clear estimates, they will not come back. In fact, they'll silently leave. The old Yelp review happens, all that kind of thing. So interestingly enough, the ADA, was like, "Oh no, we're fine. We don't need to worry about the No Surprises Act." And then there was a little blip, and I gave you the link there that you can look it up. And they basically said there are some plans that it could apply to. Well, again, the people on this call probably would be able to work through those nuances, but the vast majority of front office people still getting trained fresh off fresh out of school are not going to know those nuances. So what I am urging many of you out there, I would love for you to get in the habit of just making sure that you are as clear as possible. Act like the No Surprises Act does apply to you. And the No Surprises Act, for those of you who are unaware, basically says if you're out of network for the medical side, then you do need to make sure that they are aware it's out of network. You have to be as transparent as possible. You have to get signatures and all that stuff. Well, we kind of do that already in dentistry. So I'm always surprised by the pushback that I hear from people like, "Well, we don't have to do that." I'm like, but why wouldn't you? Like, it's just, to me as a patient, imagine saying to a patient, "Well, we're not going to worry about giving you an accurate treatment plan estimation because that act doesn't apply to us. We don't have to do that." As a patient, I would be like, what is wrong with you? So I think we have to really take it upon ourselves to be customer service minded with that. So Kevin, I love giving this class because these are some of the things I want to say in my real class that we give CE for, and
Absolutely.
I can't do it, right? So this is like the raw figuring out of what's going on out there.
We've got to use that clown photo more. I'm just telling you, we
It
have.
is terrifying. And there was another one where he was holding a chainsaw, and I was like, who are these people taking pictures? Like, that is terrifying. So, but that's going to go on a Christmas card to my husband because he is terrified of clowns.
Oh,
But anyway,
perfect.
so we Kevin and I, it was funny because I was like, are these your bold predictions? Because they look a lot like my bold predictions too. And he's like, no, I put these together. I was like, they're kind of mine too. So I think we're good with it. But do you want to go through a couple of these real quick,
Yeah,
Kevin?
yeah. Well, I'm going to hit one, and I want your opinion because you're the insurance expert, not me. But I do believe that in the wake of what has happened with United Healthcare and their CEO, and what has come out about how much that healthcare and industry and insurance is now making, I do predict that insurance is really going to come under the radar and under the scope of why are we making all this money in 2025. So I think that that's going to be really something that I'm watching for sure.
Well, and I have mixed emotions on this because first of all, I think it's some of the vitriol against this
Yeah.
the CEO is just awful to see, and I think us in healthcare, we're not quite that bloodthirsty, but holy cow. And he did make a lot of money. But if you look at the percentage of how much money he was actually managing versus his salary, it's not too out of line with lots of other CEOs, but that's not what the public wants to hear. And it doesn't make me feel better, right? Because especially when I'm dealing with a denied claim, it doesn't make me feel better at all.
Absolutely. And so I think that that's just been so in
Mhm.
everybody's face. And like you said, the reaction to it, I think that it is going to come under the radar. And then, I am going to say again, we have heard all the talk about fluoride, what could happen with that.
Yeah.
And so I think we dental practices have to be ready for if fluoride comes out, what happens? And so I think the dental practices need to be ready for that, not only in terms of their business, but also in terms of talking points to their patients as well.
Right. Right. Because there could be a part of your population that supports it, and then there could be a part that just is disgusted with it. But at the same time, we're there to be of a service. And one of the services we offer is fluoride. So if it's not in the water, then we're there to help them out with that, should they ask. Yeah, and I think when you were talking about the insurance and more scrutiny, but the fluoride too, like legislatively, I've never been more aware of the legislative activity in my whole career than I have in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And so really, we have to take a look at that. Now, the other thing, so the scrutiny piece, there's two areas of scrutiny that I'm keeping an eye on. First of all, the use of AI in claims. And so I know there's, all over, you see it in Facebook and you hear it, doctors, doctors are like, oh, they're using AI to deny everything. So there are actually already laws on the books about it, but you will see that they're going to firm those up. So they're kind of like, it's almost like some of the laws are like, well, a human has to be the one that does the final denial. But now states are turning around and looking. I want to say Missouri or Alabama just proposed something where basically you have to show who is actually doing the denial. It can't be like a first denial by, if there's documentation sent in. But I want to say to everybody, calm down, because AI has been looking at our claims for years. So it's not new. And something that one of the carriers, one of the dental consultants told me has always stuck with me, that the amount of claims that are circulating out there, they only really are able to scrutinize a small percentage of them bandwidth wise. There's actually a shortage of dental consultant reviewers. So the vast majority of claims are kind of let go. And I know that sounds weird because it feels like they're all getting scrutinized in your office, right? But the fact is, when you're in network, you will be scrutinized more. When you go out of network, you don't get those requests. You don't get those denials as much. You will fight more when you're in network. And so maybe that'll go away. So the AI is one piece, and the network transparency, that's going to be huge. And in fact, one of the carriers in a course I went to said that if we don't fix this network issue, the network leasing issue, the government will do it for us. And they're right. They're absolutely right. So, and it's already starting. So hopefully we have some relief when it comes to that. But then that kind of goes back up to that top thing, Kevin, where we've talked about, like, the staffing is so bad out there, the situation is so bad in certain areas that I think we have to turn to outsourcing. We have to turn to, the programs that are going to make life easy for us.
And I think we also have to be willing to do that and be willing to say that this isn't your father's or mother's dental practice. I think that this is something that we have to understand that again, things aren't going to get a lot better whenever it comes to staffing. So we're going to have to adjust the sales. And
Mhm.
I think the dental practices need to be prepared for that next year.
Well, and I will say too, because I didn't talk too much about it, but it is, the medical dental integration and then procedures being sent out rather than keep being kept in house. And the reason that we were talking about that is that when you don't have, and I've seen this in when I go out to speak, if you don't have a lot of hygienists in the area, you haven't had a hygienist in the area, you're not going to be doing a lot of scaling and root planing. You're immediately going to be referring. So periodontists right now are like, oh my gosh, I have like no more room. And so I see a lot of that where they're trying, it used to be like dentists would try to keep as much in-house because of course like endo is very profitable, but now endo is problematic litigation wise. There's all these issues there. So I think now we're starting to see that referrals are picking up, but hygiene in particular. And one of the stories that I shared with Kevin on one of the most recent episodes of Chew on This is that and it was right when he shared that screen with me on the salaries, and I was lecturing to a office manager study club virtually, and they were in Bellevue, and I always ask like, well, how much are you guys paying your hygienist? And it was 100 an hour is what they're paying up there. Now, granted, they have expanded functions, but still. So that really speaks to what you were saying, where they may bring in a ton of dental hygienists for the schools, but they don't graduate as many because they lose them. They don't have enough instructors. It's harder because maybe the quality of the instructors isn't there. And if I'm a dental hygienist and I can make 100 an hour, why would I go teach at the dental school or at the community college? Do you see what I mean? Like it just is not going to happen. So
Yeah,
I'm worried about it.
we're gonna have to figure out the answer to that because it's not going to fix itself. I
Mhm.
think that something's going to need to be figured out, and what that is, I am not the right person to say,
Yeah.
but I can tell you the ADA is keeping a very close eye on that.
Yeah. We didn't even get into that, the dental hygiene compact and all that stuff. And I mean, I know some states are allowing foreign trained dentists to kind of fast track so that they can do hygiene. And I actually, maybe it's unpopular, but I actually like that because there's got to be some sort of easing on the market. The other anecdote I want to share with you is talking to a dentist in a very rural area. And he said, I haven't had a hygienist in like a year and a half. I've been doing my own hygiene. And he's like, I don't even barely do that because I'm doing work. And he's like, there's not even a hygienist. Like it's not even like a tumbleweed comes through, right? So like there's no hygienist. And so he's had to adapt. And then our good friend Alan Mead, who does the Very Dental podcast, he had a guest on, and the guest was talking about how there's an office that he doesn't have a hygienist. He just basically he's fee for service completely, and he just sees he sees his patients, and it's almost like it's like a concierge thing. And if the patient wants a cleaning, they make an appointment, but he doesn't get new patients in through hygiene, which is the traditional way, right? Like if
Right.
you just want to be a patient, here's what it's like to be a patient. And so that's a totally different model. And I think, I mean, I love my hygienist friends, I do, but this is unsustainable. And the fact that in healthcare in general, we're not getting a lot of workforce, Kevin, not just dental, but we're
Right.
in trouble.
Absolutely. And again, we're going to have to rethink things. We're going to have to rethink, you mentioned that fee for service model. Is that
Mhm.
something that we see more of in the future?
Yep.
Here in Colorado, of course, the hygienists can, have their own thing, and it's been a very interesting thing to watch that relationship evolve. So I'm curious to see what happens moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting year, and we have to make sure that we don't go another couple years, Kevin. I mean,
Yeah.
here we get busy, right? So, and definitely we're gonna you can unmute yourself, put a question in the chat if you want. But I wanted to share that Kevin and I do have a lot of fun on the podcast. We talk about this stuff, it gets serious, and then we totally devolve into just giggling. But it is funny. I do hear from a lot of you that it's funny. He taught me how to mew, the looks maxing thing, and so I was trying that. And it's like,
Looking wonderful, by the way.
oh, it
It's
was,
fantastic.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, my turkey neck might be might be firming up. I'm not sure. But you know, our editors, God bless them, they do some fantastic things here. And then we talked about, you know, the Savo lions in Africa. That's what that great graphic is from. They actually found DNA on there, and we talked about that and how it applies human DNA on the lion's teeth. That was kind of fun. And then space dentistry. I didn't know that your tooth, if your tooth is in that bad a shape, and if you go high enough, you know, maybe not just airplane, but high enough, like in a shuttle, your tooth could explode. There's a term for it, and the pressure on the tooth is barodontalgia. I never knew that, Kevin. So that's my new
You love
vocabulary
that term.
word.
You
Yeah,
do.
that's my new words with friends. You're gonna see that.
Fun, bring it.
Right. So I'm telling you guys this because I invite you to listen to us and check us out on YouTube, check us out on the podcast. And then we do want to absolutely thank our friends CareCredit and Pearl for supporting us tonight. And again, you don't have to scan the QR code if you're live, because the link to the handouts is in the chat, and you can just go directly to the Google Drive. But if you're listening to this on the replay, that is how you get all of the handouts, the all of the slides. We're giving them to you. That's our contact information, our websites, and how you can find us. And if anybody has any questions, go ahead and unmute yourself. And this is just, now we're going to party. So if you feel like jumping off, we want to thank you for being
Yeah,
on.
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you all so much for your time. We know it's valuable, especially this time of year. And Teresa is right. We will not go 2+ years doing this again. We will definitely do this again next year. That's always a blast. And we appreciate you guys being on with us.
All right. So any questions? And I know some of you, if you have any questions about the hygiene thing too, I mean, I know I have a lot of hygienist friends that are listening on here, and it is going to be interesting to kind of get their point of view on how this goes. So just unmute yourself and start talking.
Yep.
One thing,
It-
Kevin, that has come up in conversations, because you were saying like, okay, it's okay to make $100 an hour, but you have to make sure that there's ROI, right? So that's an interesting thought, because a lot of the hygiene consultants that I know are thinking, okay, how are we supposed to stick with this 30%, 33% number that we've been sticking with? Because dentists now are making, they're coming, they're doing implants, they're doing all on four. So what is this 33% of? And if the dentist is doing like $18,000 days because the technology is up there, how on earth? And Dana's right. She just put in there,
Yeah.
it's not about the hourly rate. You got to look at total compensation, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. But when you've got the technology that the dentist is capable of and the billing that the dentist is capable of, the hygienist is kind of trapped with a
Well,
certain number of codes, right? So I don't know.
absolutely. And I will bang the drum just real quickly that, you need to know what your state dental assistants are allowed to do. And you need to be maximizing them to their full impact according to state law. That is something that I will always say. And states like Washington, states like Minnesota, absolutely. If you have a dental assistant there and they're not doing everything that is legally allowed in that state, you're missing out a whole bunch of opportunities there to boost your bottom line.
And I think that's a good way to elevate them. Do you know what I mean? Like an assistant
Sure.
who is given more duties, that's how they stick around. They got to feel like there's a pathway there. Dana's
Absolutely.
on fire with all her stats here.
Oh, I know.
The
I hear her
producer.
upstairs. Trust me. She's all
Yeah,
that.
she's typing away 2.5 to 3 times their total compensation. And yes, Anne Marie, always practice whether hygienist or assistant to the highest level of the state
Yeah.
practice, 100%.
Yeah.
And Kathy, I saw she unmuted. Did you have something to say, Kathy?
Yeah, probably regarding hygienists and assistants doing scaling. I know I get lots of emails, what's going on in Illinois and all the things, and here in Washington. And the thing that I think hygienists, they go, no, I don't want assistant scaling, is because they're not identifying the educational component. Washington State right now is going to the legislature with a 6-week program that they use in the military, and then allow them to do hygiene after only 6 weeks. Well, then why am I going to school for 2 years and $65,000 to $80,000 a year as a hygienist? And, if the educational component is there, it's like Oregon can now, EFTA assistants can do local anesthesia, but the program is just the same as for hygienists. So I think if these states want to do that, they've got to at least have the education, enough education that our patients will be safe. And the thing that, since I talk so much about codes, they go, well, what procedure code are the assistants using when they scale only above the gum line? And to be honest, the only code would be a 1999. There is no code. Prophy is the whole surface down to the attachment. So I said, if they're billing a prophy, they're kind of not billing accurately. They need to use, so that there's so much confusion. But I think the educational piece is what hygienists wouldn't mind them doing.
Yeah.
As long as they have the education to be able to keep our patients safe.
Kevin, we talked about that on our the one episode of Minnesota, because they're allowing assistants to do the anesthesia too, and it was only certain blocks. It wasn't all of them. And I remember we went through the curriculum, and I was like, this is a lot. Like, this is a lot. So I'm glad to see that.
I will say Minnesota is always so progressive whenever it comes to what their assistants can do, but they're also you make a very good point, Kathy. It's got to be patient safety always has to come first, but communication between assistant and hygienist has to be there as well, because one of the things I'm hearing, and I know you are as well, is that there's starting to be this budding between those two, and we have to keep the infighting at a minimum in any way, shape, or form. And if people are stepping on other turf, that's where we've got to have that communication, where if the dental board is making a decision, or whoever it is, that people understand the lane, and there may be some hurt feelings, but we've got to make sure that these people don't leave the industry because of it.
Well, and one of the things that I always thought is, what are they talking about increasing assistance? You look at your chart, that there aren't enough assistants either, almost worse than hygiene shortage, our assistant shortage.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that the bomb that I always drop is that over the next 5 years, the Dental Assisting National Board, our friends at Danby, are projecting that we are going to lose a third of the dental assistants we have currently. That's
and if they all start doing hygiene, then what?
Well, and they're going to age out, they're going to leave the industry, they're going to become hygienists. I mean, you're exactly right. So we as an industry have to start thinking about a world where we've got fewer and fewer assistants and what that really means. And to me, that's a scary world. It absolutely is.
So I'll say something kind of, for all of my admin brothers and sisters on the call here, I'm not, please don't take this personally, but I would think, as when you look at AI, we could be replaced a lot easier, right? So if you're going to replace any person on the team and make us more efficient, we actually are the ones who are probably more on the chopping block. But assistants are so hard to train and get in there, and we can't AI them away. I mean, there's only so much, they're hands-on. So I think that's so problematic. But and Kathy, I want your opinion, but Anne-Marie too, if you want to unmute, because you guys are both hygienists and hygiene educators. What is the word on the street about the hygiene educators? Like, why? I know why it's so hard. The pay is not there, but why aren't they allowing there to be more supervision? Or more, I guess, change the supervision. For those of you that aren't aware, when you go, I think code, correct me if I'm wrong, CODA, it's something like, for example, the hygiene, there's like 4 students to 1 instructor, just for example. But the dental schools, it's almost double that, like 8 students per an instructor. So you actually need more hygiene instructors per CODA. Why is that like that? Why can't we change that requirement?
Well, the requirement is 5 to 1.
Okay.
But now CODA is saying you can throw that out the window and do anything, which is going to be really problematic, because as a clinical educator, I have a hard time getting around to 5 students doing scaling and root planing and all the things they do, getting around to 5 of them in a clinic session. And I feel like I'm always evaluating them to get started, and then I'm checking them out. I don't have that time to teach at 1 to 5. And if they go bigger than that, think of those little sharp, curvy little curettes going in the 8mm pocket. You can't just say, here, go on your own, kind of thing. So I'm again worried about the safety of the patient. If there's more than 5 to 1, it's really hard. If they all have adult propies, I go a little bit but most of them are doing perio because that's what they're trying to learn. So, the fact that they want to pull that out of there, it
Well,
scares me.
that's the interesting point of view because I didn't think of it like that. So I'm just thinking let's get more students in there. So there is always the other side. That's a great perspective. If
And
there's
so
any
many,
other hygiene
yeah,
hygiene
so many of
educators
the
on the call.
patients that are coming through the hygiene program don't
Mhm.
have a lot of money,
Yeah.
but they're in the senior range. Their health history evaluations can take up to an hour just evaluating that, looking up the meds and whatnot in a hygiene program. So you
Mhm.
factored those kinds of things in. It isn't just sitting down, picking up an instrument and working. We've
Yeah.
got to, we really need closer supervision on those students to be able to help them treat the patients.
And Kevin, what's the status of like dental assisting schools? Because I mean,
Yeah.
like we talked about, a lot of them are aging out.
Well, and a lot of dental assisting schools never opened up after COVID again. It was something that was the death knell for some of these CODA accredited schools. And so what you're seeing now are more and more dentists that are trying to do dental assistant education.
Mhm.
And a lot of these dentists pick the best of that crop to work in their practice. And then the rest, are picked up in other places. So it's not a bad thing, but it's
Right.
also, you're talking about a class size of 8. So you're definitely seeing fewer and fewer being trained in a school rather than on the job. And
Mhm.
so when we talk about AI from the dental system point of view, I can tell you, I automatically think about that second assistant who's in there who has to train the new assistant. Is there something that could be done there AI wise that can be done with infection control, that can be done with, tray setup, processing, whatever it might be?
Yeah.
I think that there are some possibilities there.
Well, and I think you could probably use it to create a curriculum for your class. I mean, for
Yep.
your office, like here's how it works. And then also patient interaction. That's coming. I've seen a couple models where you can, give it good phrasing and it's still very raw. But I'll tell you what's almost ready for prime time all over. And I am so impressed is the ones answering the phone, the AI receptions. And I mean, listen, I was fantastic on the phone. I think many of us here who are office administrators were like amazing on the phone, but it does take a lot of time. So honestly, if the AI bot can take care of it and they sound great and they answer questions better than a new trainee would, why wouldn't you let that person on there? And that's a scary thing for me to acknowledge, right? Because I was all ready to be like, oh, it sounds like, Kit from Knight Rider, which now that's an old joke there, but
Come on,
Remember
Scott.
that?
but but
There's
here's the
so
thing.
many products like that, Teresa, that are
Yeah,
out there
yeah,
on, AI receptionists that sound almost human or actually do sound human.
mhm,
Or, for example, in terms of the education, there's a part of Columbia University that has in their dental school a section that they're using AI to monitor students, to monitor patients. So in regards to the faculty ratios, I get what Kathy's saying about the 5-to-1, but if a school has the ability to use AI to look at some of these things that a traditional instructor would be doing, that's another avenue.
wow. I see. Yeah, you probably listen to them, Anne Marie. That's your world too, but I don't think they sound that bad. And I'll be honest, I think there's a generation of people coming up that don't care that they're talking to a bot.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
maybe
I
they're more
think
annoyed talking to me because I'm going to ask them how they're doing and how'd you find us and who can we thank for referring you? And they're just like, give me a time, right?
yep. Noah, Julia, I mean, that next generation, seriously, they're used to it. And I
Yeah.
think we've got to know that as workers. Yeah.
Well, I think we should wrap this up. We went over and thank you guys for hanging in there and listening to our chatter. Appreciate the input and yeah, and hopefully you guys sign up again if we will do this again and check out the podcast, right?
Please. Absolutely. Thank you all so much. It's been a blast. And yeah, here's to a great year ahead for everybody and a happy holiday season.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.